1st, 2017. I wanted to do a video today to give my opinion on a couple of things and point out that I think 2017 should be a year that we really push back against the corporate legacy media. I think we have seen now with Brexit and the US presidential election that the corporate legacy news has been completely invalidated. They are either corrupt or incompetent, and I would suggest both. With the Brexit vote, they consistently said that the stay side was going to win, most likely in an overwhelming fashion. They were completely wrong. So at the very least, they were incompetent. They said the same thing with the US presidential election, that Hillary Clinton was going to win, most likely in a landslide. They were completely wrong. And through both of those processes, they were wrong every step of the way. They were not only incompetent, they were corrupt. They were actively trying to alter the outcome of both of those votes, Brexit, and the US election, presidential election, by influencing petty people that just wanted to vote with the winner, and so would vote with the stay side of Brexit and vote for Hillary Clinton in the US presidential election. And simultaneously, they wanted to try to discourage people for the leave side of Brexit from voting by giving the impression that, wow, the stay side is going to win in a landslide. There's no point in getting up off your ass. Just grab a nail and sit down and watch the football match. And I think they were trying to do the same thing with the US president election. Well, Hillary's going to win in a landslide. There's no point in you buffoons, you rubes that want to vote for Trump to get off your ass. Just stay at home, crack a beer, turn on the NFL. Not a problem. I think we've seen point blank two massive examples in 2016 why we should no longer be supporting the corporate legacy news media. We have now the proof that cable television it's not good for us. Okay, if you're looking at just the news in terms of forecasting and providing accurate information, they're no good. They don't know how to do their job. We should be pushing back against some of these apologies they gave after being so wrong on both of these votes, Brexit and the US election. They come out with these insincere apologies of how they're going to try to do better. It wasn't their fault that they were so far off the mark. And what's the proof of that? Well, everybody else was so far off the mark. So how could it have possibly been just us? It was some unexplainable force that stepped into the world and made it impossible for them to accurately forecast what was going on. And it's time for us to start pushing back against that rubbish. So what I'm going to suggest here is I'm going to suggest that people in 2017, turn off your televisions. The news is junk. The programming is junk. Even the comedy shows. They just take a stencil, they take a template, and they just move it from one setting to the next. Okay, it'll be the same characters in the workplace setting, the same characters in the home setting, the same characters in a business setting of some sort. Right? You could have something as diverse as somebody working for a delivery company to somebody having a hot air balloon service, and all the jokes are going to be the same. Right? All the trials and tribulations are going to be the same. It's going to be the same characters in all of these programs. You're going to have the, the smart ass guy. You're going to have the selfish guy that once in a while has a come to Jesus moment. You're going to have the intelligent, sharp woman that, still has sympathy for the poor dumb man. It's just all the same characters. They just change the backdrop. And I think it's also time that the grown adults in Western civilization start admitting that they spend more time watching this stuff than they presently admit. I've put my money where my mouth is. 15 years ago, at least, I threw the TV that I had out. I knew that I wasn't going to get basically, I had an old television. I didn't want to spend the money to get a nice new television, and the new televisions are very nice. They're great pieces of technology. I don't want to belittle that element of it, but I decided that I was getting no value out of Cablevision and what it was offering. So there was no point in me when I moved buying a new TV. There was no point in dragging the old one with me. So I threw it out and I never looked back. When I lost track of how much it cost for cable, I would ask people, how much does it cost for cable these days? Anyway, it's $150 and I got 400 channels of garbage. And as I mentioned before, I would ask them, well, what do you have it for? Why are you spending your money on that? Oh, I don't have time to watch television myself. I get it for the kids. Well, firstly, that's an insane answer that that you wouldn't spend your time doing this particular activity, but you would subject your children to it, especially now that we can see that television is garbage. But the other thing is that I felt people were lying about how much television they watch. Older people in at that time, my age bracket, which is 40 and over, that they lie about how much TV they watch. Well, just this evening, I've done this previously, but just this evening I was kind of refamiliarizing myself with some of the statistics on daily viewing of television. And you know what? Some of the largest viewers of television in terms of hours per day are people over the age of 40. So I was right all along. People lie about how much television they watch. So my suggestion is turn your television off. Keep your cable hooked up. I know that if you're in the States, I think in some areas, maybe it's right across the United States, you can't disengage your cable from your internet. It's a package deal. You're going to get cable anyway. Okay, well, that's fine. Then that means you're going to pay for cable anyway. Turn it off. That's what I'm pushing for, is 2017 to be the year that people get rid of don't get rid of your TV. You can hook your TV up to the internet. You can find all kinds of things on the internet that is far, far more beneficial mentally and for your grasp on what's really happening on this planet than you're ever going to find on television. So, what I've pointed out to people in the past is that, when you get rid of your television, that's when you find out who you are. Okay, because don't forget, we've had TV around for a lot of decades now. It's really permeated our society and our culture. And so when I've said things like that, people, look and kind of respond and say, what do you mean that's when you find out who you are? You're kind of over exaggerating there a little bit, aren't you? Find out who you are, like I'm over exaggerating some kind of, existential epiphany. But in the fact, that is the reality of the matter. Because what it comes down to is that the average adult over the age of 40 now, it doesn't seem to matter where you look, but if you look in Canada and United States, they're spending about 3 hours a day watching TV. Okay, well that's 21 hours a week. That's half a full-time job sitting in front of the television. So you imagine what you accomplish at half a week's work, how much you get done. And translate that to how much you could get done in your spare time with 20 hours a week instead of watching television. It's a lot. It's a hell of a lot. The reason I say that's when you find out who you are is because that's the point at which you're going to have to say, I got a lot of time on my hands here. I have 3 hours a day now that I have to fill. What am I going to do with it? You're not going to sit there staring at a blank wall. You're going to do something. So what are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to have to ask yourself, well, who am I and what have I always wanted to do? What are the things that I have always wanted to do that I've claimed I didn't have enough time to do them because now I have enough time? So you have to actually go inside yourself and ask yourself, who am I and what do I want to do with this time? It's the only thing you really have from birth to death is time. It's a pretty big part of who you are. So it is where you find out who you are. Now, for me, when I gave up television, I did precisely that. What am I going to do with all this time? I've got all this time I have. What have I always been interested in and never really looked into to any real depth? For me, it was human history. And I can find all the history that I want on the internet. The very first thing I did when I gave up television is I went on the internet and I did a search for documentaries and found 3 websites full of documentaries. Probably had upwards of 400 to 500 documentaries at my disposal instantaneously, just from actively not watching the television and deciding to pursue things that I've always been interested in and always claimed that I didn't have the time to research. Well, now I've got the time. So for example, the very first documentary I watched when I had made this decision to get rid of television was a documentary made by a gentleman that I would say is a very upstanding individual, a journalist, by trade. And it turns out he's still on the internet today doing independent news. One of the websites where you can actually get accurate news, and that's a gentleman by the name of Bill Still. He does he has an internet news channel, YouTube, called The Still Report. And the documentary that he did all those years ago for me that I saw was called The Money Masters. Really, really comprehensive look at the history of money. So, that's just an example, but that took me off into studying gold, silver, their properties of money, just their properties of metal. Do you know how many things silver are in? Go into a hospital and look at every aspect of what is in a hospital, and you will find silver all over the place because of its antimicrobial properties. It's absolutely astounding. It's an amazing, amazing metal. So it's another example of how this gets into, you have to look into who you are to fill the new time that you have without television, and how I right off the bat gravitated toward metals. Why? Well, when I was a kid, I was massively interested in what comes out of the earth, the stones, the rocks, everything. I used to stare at rocks with particular formations in them for hours trying to figure out how did planet Earth make that. And one of my favorite things to this day right now is gold and silver. I love gold and silver, the properties of it, platinum, palladium, the properties of these things. It's absolutely astounding. But anyway, I'm just using that as an example of what happens when you turn the television off and you start getting involved in activities that have really, most of the time I would say, have interested you from the point of being a kid. That simply turning off the TV will re-spark these interests, reinvigorate these interests, because why? You're looking into who you are, because now you need to fill this 20 hours a week that you have at your disposal. For example, last year I had a massive patio garden. I'm in a one-bedroom apartment here. It's a nice place. I love the neighborhood I live in. I love the neighbors that I have and everything. It's perfectly fine for me. I'm quite happy in it. And I have a small patio, but it's a perfect south-facing patio. And this year, for example, I decided to go hog wild on a patio garden because of some subject matter that came up with what, again, another internet YouTube channel, gentleman by the name of Chris Martenson. And you can go and find out why he talks about growing your own food on your own if you go to chrismartenson.com. And no, this is not an advertisement for him. I'm just simply trying to show you that there's way more valuable things on the internet that you're ever going to find on TV. So I had posed a question to Chris Martenson regarding, if he had any idea what quantities of food a person could actually grow on their patio. And he was a little bit unenthusiastic about it, and that's fine because he's got, you can see the way he talked, a good sized chunk of land. But I thought, no, I kind of took that as a challenge, and I decided to have a pretty kick-ass patio garden this year. Anyway, that's my suggestion for 2017. I hope this is resonating with some people out there, because I really think that it's the perfect year to push back against that corrupt corporate legacy news media and tell them, no, your non-apology apologies are not good enough this time. You're done. We don't need you. As Donald Trump would say, you're fired.